They didn't die screaming, not at first. They died waiting, watching the horizon, hoping for food that would never come. Inside the walls, thousands were trapped. Outside, even more waited to kill them. And between those two forces, there was no escape. The year was 52 BC, and the hilltop fortress of Alesia had become something far worse than a battlefield. Inside those walls were tens of thousands of Gauls, led by Vercingetorix, a leader who had done the impossible, united tribes that had been enemies for generations. He was more than a commander, he was a symbol of resistance. And outside, surrounding that hill like a tightening noose, stood the Roman army under Julius Caesar. He wasn't there just to win a battle. He was there to end a rebellion so completely that no one would ever dare rise again. But Caesar didn't attack. That's what made it terrifying. Instead of charging the walls or storming the gates, he ordered his men to build. They were building a prison. A massive ring of fortifications wrapped itself around Alesia, cutting it off completely from the outside world. Deep ditches were carved into the earth. Some were filled with water, others lined with sharpened stakes hidden beneath the surface. Wooden traps were buried just beneath the soil. Step in the wrong place and you wouldn't just fall, you'd be impaled. Above it all stood towers, spaced evenly, filled with Roman soldiers who watched everything. Nothing moved without being seen. Fires burned through the night, casting long shadows across the battlefield, a constant reminder that the Romans were always there, always watching. But Caesar understood something else. Somewhere beyond those hills, another army was gathering. So Caesar did something almost unthinkable. He built a second wall. This one didn't face Alesia. It faced outward toward the open land beyond. Now the Romans were surrounded too, but by their own design. One wall to keep the Gauls in, another to keep reinforcements out. It was a cage inside a battlefield. And if you were inside Alesia, you were already running out of time. At first, there was still hope. Supplies hadn't run out yet. Food was rationed carefully. People whispered to each other at night, convincing themselves that help was coming. But the days kept passing, and the Romans didn't leave. Hunger doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in slowly. First, it's just discomfort, a dull ache in your stomach. Then it becomes constant, impossible to ignore. Your body weakens, your thoughts slow. Every movement takes more effort than it should. Inside Alesia, that hunger began to spread. Children cried through the night, their voices growing weaker with each passing day. Mothers tried to comfort them, but their own strength was fading. People started eating whatever they could find, scraps, leftovers, things they would have once thrown away without a second thought. And outside, the Romans waited. They didn't rush, they didn't panic, they didn't waste energy. They knew exactly what was happening inside. As the food disappeared, something else took its place: fear. Not the kind that comes from facing an enemy in battle, but something deeper. The leaders understood the truth before anyone else. There wasn't enough, not for everyone. So they made a decision, one that would leave a scar deeper than any wound. They ordered the women, the children, and the elderly to leave the fortress. Families clung to each other, refusing to separate until they were pushed apart. They walked into the empty space between the walls and the Roman lines. They believed the Romans might let them pass, that they might show mercy. But mercy was never part of Caesar's plan. He didn't attack them. He didn't help them either. He simply refused to let them through. Some tried to crawl back to the gates. They weren't allowed in. There was no space, no food, no hope left to share. It was a slow, silent kind of horror, and there was nothing anyone could do. If you were inside that fortress, this is the moment you would begin to break. Then, finally, something changed. On the horizon, a cloud of dust appeared. At first, it was distant, barely visible, but as it grew larger, the truth became clear. The relief army had arrived. Inside Alesia, something shifted. Hope returned. The relief army attacked with everything they had. Inside Alesia, the defenders joined the fight, launching attacks against the inner wall. For a moment, it almost worked. Roman defenses began to strain, weak points appeared, and then Caesar moved. His presence spread through the Roman ranks like fire. Soldiers who were on the verge of breaking found strength they didn't know they had. The final assault came with everything they had left. It was desperate, furious, unrelenting. And it wasn't enough. The Roman walls held, the relief army broke, and then they retreated. Inside Alesia, silence followed. No more war cries, no more movement on the horizon, just the quiet realization that it was over. Hope didn't fade this time. It disappeared completely. There was nothing left. No food, no reinforcements, no way out. Only a choice. Fight and die, or surrender. Vercingetorix understood this better than anyone. He had united the tribes. He had led them through battles and victories. He had given them something to believe in. But even he couldn't fight hunger. He couldn't break walls that had already closed in. So he made his decision. The gates opened one final time. He rode out alone. No army followed him. No weapons were raised. He approached Julius Caesar and laid down his arms. No words were needed. The siege was over. Inside the fortress, the survivors waited for what would come next. Many were taken as slaves. Others were executed. The rebellion that once threatened Rome was crushed completely, and Caesar had his victory. But this wasn't just a battle won. It was a message. The walls of Alesia didn't just trap an army. They crushed a future. You wouldn't survive this siege.